My name is Nicole Monies, and I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation out of the District 1 office. I'm the Environmental Permits Coordinator. My presentation will be on the wildlife crossing location decision making along the Florida Interstate 4 corridor. Florida is one of the fastest growing areas in the United States, getting 900 new residents each day. Much of this growth has occurred along the I-4 corridor, which includes the urban centers of Tampa, Orlando, and Daytona Beach, and has an average annual daily traffic volume of over 90,000. Due to rapid development and associated habitat fragmentation adjacent to I-4, identifying potential locations for wildlife crossings and protecting remaining habitat connections between South and North Florida has become extremely important. FDOT utilizes a variety of tools to identify potential locations for these wildlife crossings. So why are these tools important? FDOT wants to ensure long-term viability and usage of each crossing. The Florida Panther vehicle collision hotspots and panther mortality data helps determine if there's an immediate need. The least cost pathways assist in determining where the animals might cross. The conservation lands data and future land use maps ensures the lands adjacent to the proposed crossing is under conservation and will not be developed. The animal telemetry data is known data of where animals are crossing, and the Florida Ecological Greenways Network identifies the corridors listed as important to the state of Florida. I'll be focusing this presentation specifically in the FDOT District 1 in Polk County. Per the 1998 EA FONSI for I-4, FDOT committed to provide the opportunity for wildlife corridor enhancement by constructing low-level bridges at 3 locations in Polk County. Over the years, several modifications to the crossing locations and design criteria have been proposed. In 2016, FDOT published a reevaluation of the I-4 wildlife crossings, and in 2017, FDOT hosted a stakeholder meeting wherein new locations and design criteria for 3 Polk County wildlife crossings were established and agreed upon by both FWC and FWS. First, we're going to start with the Saddle Creek crossing. The crossing would connect the Peace River, Saddle Creek to the Green Swamp. There are several obstacles in this particular location. To the south, there are currently vacant lands, which is now fish management area, with potential future development towards the west. However, none of these lands are under conservation. Another obstacle is the Polytechnic College to the east, along with the 4-lane road that runs west to east to the south of the proposed crossing. Directly to the north is a new commercial warehouse. North of the commercial warehouse is State Road 33, then another local road. North of CR 582 is the Halochi Wildlife Management Area, in which there are conservation lands. So here's a little bit better look at the map. Here's the future development. Here's conservation lands that are needed. Here's the proposed crossing, the college, and then the Halochi management area. Different types of crossings are evaluated for each specific location. Ultimately, for Saddle Creek crossing, an overpass was chosen. Many factors came into play, such as the availability of right-of-way, existing profile and elevation of the current road, and the cost. Preliminary cost estimates for the wildlife underpass exceeded $15 million, which did not include the legacy costs for the ultimate build-out of the interstate. FDOT investigated the potential for an overpass, which would require right-of-way only on the north side, since FDOT already owned property on the south side. And this particular design would only cost $8 million, which also accommodates the ultimate build-out. Some of the obstacles we discussed was the commercial building to the north. As a state transportation agency, we are limited in what we can influence beyond our right-of-way. To identify wildlife corridors which need to be protected beyond the limits of the I-4 corridor, it will take a collaborative effort with many stakeholders, such as private landowners, local agencies and municipalities, state and federal agencies, conservation groups, land trusts, counties and cities, and NGOs. So this commercial warehouse required permits from FDOT and the Water Management District. FDOT was able to work with the warehouse owner to secure the right-of-way for touchdown for the proposed I-4 overpass wildlife crossing. Next, we're going to talk about the Western Green Swamp. This project is currently under construction. Let's take a closer look. To the west, you see the I-4 at 557 interchange. This was already within the work program. So what we did was extend the limits of the project to include this area and include a wildlife crossing in the design. Prior to designing this particular location, FDOT placed motion-activated trail cameras on both sides of I-4 to better understand the type and abundance of wildlife in the vicinity. So here you see on the south and north side of the location that we chose, we did get a variety of wildlife. FDOT initially considered replacing an existing box culvert with a new bridge, which would accommodate the wildlife. Ultimately, the design build contractor chose to extend the box culvert and provide a separate wildlife crossing bridge structure. Even with this data, predicting how Florida's wildlife will behave and propagate is difficult. The use of telemetry data has assisted the PRIT team, including FDOT, to evaluate wildlife usage of existing dedicated crossings as well as bridges that were not specifically intended for wildlife connectivity. So here on the right, you will see this is one bear telemetry. And taking a closer look, you see the bear crossed US 27, came up to I-4, found it too much of a barrier to cross, and then headed back south. So our new proposed Western Green Swamp crossing would have captured this bear and allowed him to safely pass underneath the interstate. Other crossing locations in consideration. Next would be the Eastern Green Swamp. This project is currently not funded for construction. One of the issues is there's a lack of protected conservation lands and defined wildlife corridor connection to Reedy Creek across US 27 and then 1792. Another consideration is the potential of the Bright Line passenger train running through the I-4 median, creating an additional barrier which would trigger the need for a wildlife crossing. Brightline's new south terminal at the Orlando International Airport is part of the Phase 2 expansion into Central Florida, including a Tampa extension. Another project that we're looking at is I-4 at Reedy Creek. Wildlife shelves are planned as part of the I-4 Ultimate Bridge widening. Construction is not currently funded for this particular project. Also at this location, a new roadway, Celebration Boulevard, is being constructed adjacent to I-4. Another consideration that would need to be taken in is wildlife fencing. This would need to either be hidden or aesthetically acceptable to Walt Disney World and the adjacent tourism area. Also, with this new Celebration Boulevard, currently no wildlife shelves are being provided in the design. Another project that FDOT is working on is to the north of that Western Green Swamp crossing. So here is State Road 33, which runs parallel to I-4 and immediately north to the other crossing. Other local roadways currently having low traffic volumes inhibits wildlife movement will need to be monitored for future retrofits once I-4 and the State Road 33 crossings are constructed. In conclusion, FDOT is actively pursuing improvements for wildlife permeability along I-4. Wildlife corridors need to be preserved to ensure viability of proposed crossings. Roadways, both state and local, adjacent to I-4 need to be considered for wildlife crossings, and better awareness of the Florida Ecological Greenways Network at the local planning and permitting level is needed. So what are our next steps? The PRIT Transportation Subteam is finalizing the least cost pathways modeling, which includes I-4. The Southwest Florida Panther hotspots is continuously being updated. We're reviewing wildlife corridor impediments to planned I-4 crossings. We're looking for opportunities for more GPS telemetry data to help verify and justify the crossing locations. Also something new, the Senate Bill 976, the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act. The legislation directed FDEP to encourage and promote investments in areas that protect and enhance the Florida Wildlife Corridor. To support these efforts, the Florida Leads budget dedicates funds specifically to protect the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Thank you, and up next is Brent Setchell.